Say that screams can be heard coming from...
Hi, I'm Bill Maher, and I'm bringing politically incorrect philosophy.
Well, how about
The antenna.
Remember this face, Junior.
Users say one hit of rock sends a massive...
And after arriving in Vegas, I got contacted by the same guy who I had done the documentary with, the NBC Sports World Grand Prix documentary. He found out I was back in town, and he found out how to get in touch with me. He contacted me and asked me if I wanted a job at the ABC affiliate, Shooting News. And, well, yeah, timing is perfect. Of course, yes, I want the job. So I went to work as a news photographer. So things were mostly routine for me, and I was learning a lot, shooting news and trying to elevate the art, I guess. Try to make it something more than just, your boring news story. And at that time, they hired, just after I started, they hired some kid fresh out of USC journalism school. And we took to each other. He kind of latched onto me, and he was willing to spend his own money and rack up credit cards to go and do these stories that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do, that the station had no intention of funding. But if Mike was willing to pay for it, then But and so he was trying to make a name for himself. So in that year, in 1986, we went to Central America and did a documentary down there. And you're thinking, how does a small town? Why are you doing it? Well, we found a local angle. Mike found a local angle of how the Central American migrants, how and where they were living in Las Vegas, and in other words, create a local angle. And then go down there, and we're going to be working out a deal with ABC News. So we're kind of like on assignment for ABC News, and we would provide material to them. And then we would do our own documentary. And going out into the front lines and everything, and working with the military, and doing a story on the President Reagan's aid package to the Contras during the Contra Sandinista Civil War. And so next thing you know, I'm shooting a documentary in Central America, and it looked good. Shortly after that, Mike and I went up and did an interview with Charles Manson.
And what makes me so mad about it is that I don't have any goddamn thought in that circle at all.
And there's a long story about how our connection with Manson and why we did this story, but basically he was incarcerated at San Quentin prison, just on the other side of Golden Gate Bridge there. And so we drove up there and we did a story on Charles Manson, and that was quite an experience. And we just started just cranking out more and more stuff like this. And so now I'm starting to win some awards and get some recognition for my work. And then Mike's hard work paid off, and then he suddenly got a job with WBBM in Chicago, and he was gone, just like that. But I was approached by one of the journalists and anchormen about doing a documentary called Behind the Badge. We scheduled to ride with Metro Police for a couple of months. Went on the road with them and operated out of different precincts, and I shot a documentary on what it's like to be a cop in Las Vegas and do a cop's job, and it was a really good documentary, and that ran in prime time, and it won many awards, and we didn't stop there. So the following year, we decided to do one on the local trauma center, level 2 trauma center at University Medical Center. And so again, they gave us unprecedented access to the hospital. I could come in basically and throw on scrubs and go anywhere in the hospital and shoot my documentary. I'm going to tell the story visually. What I would like to do is to be able to shoot a story and capture sound that would allow me to edit a documentary that doesn't require any narration or any writer, that and basically with this documentary, Life on the Line, I managed to do that. It was very, very important to the station that they have one of their on-air personalities associated with it. So, the documentary had a host, but he was allowing me to dictate the course of the story, and that he would simply write to my pictures. So I did. I told the whole story visually, and then he came back in later and filled in and basically provided the captions, if you will, to all my visuals. It was a fascinating way to do it, and I finally felt like I was creating something that was of me, because what I had decided I wanted to do was I wanted to go out and have an experience. I wanted to enter into it without really knowing anything about the story. That is, I didn't want to sit in the newsroom and write this before we went out there and did it. That doesn't make any sense to me. I wanted to have very little knowledge of it, but just the interest level, and go out there and whatever unfolds, have that experience, then come back with all that and edit it in a way to have the viewer share that experience with me. There are many different types of documentaries. There's and a lot of these documentaries you see on television, or it used to be, like on the History Channel, I didn't really consider those to be documentary. There's the documentaries that Ken Burns does, which are incredible. Some of the best documentaries out there. If you see his Civil War documentary, you already understand that he can't go back in time and literally document it. He has to do a lot of research and find the letters and photographs and all the things that and hire actors to read those letters and tell the story that way. And I love that kind of documentary. And then there's the kind of documentary that, say, Michael Moore does. His documentaries are well made. It's just that he kind of puts together the story at his desk. He has an agenda. He knows the story he wants to tell, and then he goes out there and gets material to fit that story. And that, to me, is not documentary. It looks like documentary, but it's not documentary. And then there's what I like doing, which is I want to know as little as possible and then go out there and learn it all while I'm shooting and have an experience, and let my personal experiences and my thoughts and feelings guide the camera. And if I'm doing things right, those experiences will tell me where the camera needs to be at any given moment and what I need to be shooting, and then bring that back and edit that in a way that tries to convey what I know I was experiencing at that moment. It's a great way to do it, and I did that with Life on the Line. Life on the Line won the Emmy for Best Documentary in 1990. And I was up against some pretty serious competition. I'm back. I took a little bit of a break right in the middle of making the video. It was going to be a quick break, and it lasted for almost 2 weeks. Yeah, I don't know. I just needed to break away from the edit system for a while, I guess. So I did a few of the things that I had to get done. I got my hairs cut, which I desperately needed, and did some reading, one of my other passions. So I cut up on some reading and basically just chilled out for a while and figured I would take a break before I came back to this. So I won the Emmy for Life on the Line. I didn't know I won an Emmy. I quit my job at the station in 90, and I just needed to get away from news. I didn't think there was anything else I was going to be able to do to top Life on the Line, and I was also kind of becoming disillusioned with what was happening to broadcast news. Starting to become very sensationalized and very, it was all about the entertainment aspect of it. And I just felt like it was time to move on. And it was only after I had left the station that I got a call from the station telling me that it had won the Emmy for Best Documentary, which was great. But I needed a stepping stone. My intention was to work back into production. And so a friend of mine one of my friends from high school in the TV class, he was a marketing vice president of marketing for a local credit union. And just by chance, I actually, this was while I was still at the station just before I had left. He had called me. And that might have been part of the impetus for me leaving as well, was that he gave me an out, which was, he called and asked if I would like a job. He was a department of one. This credit union was really growing, and he needed somebody in the department with him. And I guess he thought that my creative skills would be of benefit in his marketing department. So I took the job. Well, if there was one thing I learned, I do not belong in a suit and tie sitting at a desk all day. I mean, I was doing some creative work, but doing the credit union business, you're marketing financial products in the end, and trying to find clever ways to market to your membership. So it's kind of soul destroying, I guess. You don't feel great about yourself. Yeah, I knew that they were either going to have to fire me or I was going to quit, because I just couldn't. I couldn't do that for very long, and but I think I lasted around a year doing that kind of stuff, sitting there at my desk and my drafting table, my art table, and creating things, but yeah, so it was time to go. And I left the credit union and just went straight into freelance, production work, picking up jobs on commercials and industrial projects, and anything that I could do to make a living. And I was working as a grip, an electrician, camera operators. I was doing live events, a lot of commercial stuff. So as much as I was enjoying my work and paying the bills, barely, it wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. And not long after I left the credit union, a job came along for a regular client of mine, where I met a guy named Tony Carrison. He was the sound man, I was the camera operator, and it was an industrial type of thing for, I think, one of the hotel casinos. And it was just a miserable experience working with this producer. He was just the source of so much frustration for Tony and I. And we were sitting eating lunch, and he looked at me and said, we can do so much better than this. And of course I agreed, we should be in charge of these productions. We can do them cheaper and better and faster. And so shortly after that, he called me up and said, if I buy the camera and all the gear, will you, partner with me in this production company? I said, sure. And he did. Almost overnight, he dropped over $100,000 just on the basic equipment, the Sony Betacam, tripods, monitors, batteries, all the, everything we would need. And then over time, we expanded even beyond that and eventually built our own post-production editing facility. I think we might have had one of the first nonlinear editing systems in town. And next thing you know, we were in business. We were having a lot of fun. We were doing some great productions, some big budget productions. We were working with celebrities. We were doing everything from commercial to industrial, corporate, and having a good time doing it. I was doing what I loved. I was directing. I was operating camera and editing and doing everything else that comes along with it. And Tony, being a sound man by trade, he would usually handle the sound, but he was also a producer. And we went that way for a long, long time. We stayed in business together for about 10 years. I directed a show for ESPN2 called Gotta Sweat with Corey Everson. Corey was a 6-time Miss Olympia, and she had a workout show on ESPN. And I was brought in to direct that. I directed 3 seasons of it. The last 2 seasons we did in Hawaii. I loved doing that show. It was a lot of fun. And everything was going great until September 11th, 2001. The terrorist attacks on September 11th brought the world to a grinding halt. The film and television industry was hit particularly hard. It's mostly made up of, freelancers. And suddenly all those people were out of work because every script that was out there had to be reviewed for material that could be considered insensitive. Everything had to be rethought. And in fact, I remember the first Spider-Man movie was getting ready to come out, and one of the trailers, I think the trailer actually made it out there, but it was pulled pretty quickly. It had Spider-Man being chased by helicopters through New York, and he's bouncing between the buildings, and he gets up high on the World Trade Center towers, and he spins a web between the two towers and traps the helicopter, like, snaring a wasp in his web. So that had to be pulled pretty quickly, and then everything else had to go for review. All of us were suddenly out of work. Then one day, not long after that, in early 2002, I get a call from a friend and colleague, Mark Allen. I knew Mark Allen already for a few years prior to that. Mark Allen ran a company, a Western stage props company. His company supplied ropes and whips and prop guns and all the things that Western arts performers would need in their stage shows. And part of his product line was videotapes, how-tos, gun spinning and how to ride a horse and things like that. And Mark hired me to shoot some of those videos and edit the videos. And so I had known him for quite some time, and we had become friends. I really like Mark a lot. This is an example of how just things work out, that because I knew Mark and had already worked with him, and I was his go-to guy for all his video needs, I guess, then I was the one to get that call. But had I not had that relationship with him, would they have bothered doing a documentary? Would they have called somebody else to do it? And how would it have turned out? And what would have happened to me, during that period? It's interesting to think about. Mark Allen had roots in stand-up comedy, and in fact he was in a show at a comedy club on the Las Vegas Strip at the time. And I guess he and his colleagues and fellow comedians had come up with this idea to do a comedy festival, and as part of that to travel around the country auditioning people who wanted to be stand-up comedians. I guess they knew that they were going to need, they would need to record videotape all of the auditions for review and whatnot. So they needed somebody who could come along and manage the video equipment. They didn't want to do it. And being that there wasn't a lot of work, I guess Mark figured that, I would like to have the work, and he was right. So I said, yes, I would love to do it. And so we'd be on the road for a couple of months, and I'd be, assume just setting up the camera and recording the auditions every day. It's not going to be a lot of fun, but it'll pay the bills. And, who wouldn't want 2 months of work at that point, right? But I guess one of his colleagues, the co-founder, Steve Cato, who would be going on the road with us, he decided, well, if we're going to be hiring a documentary filmmaker, we should have him shoot a documentary. It was kind of smart because this is an amazing event that's going to take place that should be documented, but he wanted to do a full-blown documentary. So they purchased the second camera, so we would have a camera for the auditions and one for me to use for shooting documentary footage. And I would need a sound man, so that's where Marcus Klottfelter came into the picture. I called him and said, you want to do this and travel on the road with us for a couple of months? Sure. He was in the same boat. He needed work. And so next thing you know, we're traveling around the country, and I'm shooting a documentary. So that was in the summer of 2002. But the festival, and you'll hear all this story in the documentary, but the festival, they went another 2 years after that, so 3 years, and then it died. And there's quite an interesting story behind that. As for the documentary footage, I shot a few hundred hours worth of footage just on my camera alone. I think we had a total of something like 600 hours of tape footage. So all that footage was just put in boxes and put in storage and forgotten about. And I just went on with my life, and eventually things picked up, and And so I was back to just piecemeal, working on a movie here, working on a commercial there, a TV show there, and getting what I could. And as the years continued to tick by, I just felt like I was spinning my wheels. I was doing good work, I was having fun, but I wasn't getting rich, and I wasn't creatively fulfilled. I really wanted to be making documentaries. I had worked on several documentaries, some great documentaries. They just weren't my documentaries, and I wanted to be doing my stuff. So one day I said, there is a documentary sitting in boxes that tells a story that people need to see. And I want to tell that story, and I know what I want to do with it. And so I contacted Mark Allen. They didn't want to pay me to edit the documentary back then, but now that it's all, the festival is dead and the stuff has just been, rotting away in boxes, that maybe he'd be willing to let me have the footage so that I could cut the documentary. Of course, I would cut him in on any profits or anything if the documentary sold. Well, he no longer owned it. One of the investors in the festival, he took possession of it, and he lived in New York. And so he had all the tapes. So I contacted him, and I put together a proposal, and he came on out and visited with me here in Las Vegas. I had met him in 2002 during the Laugh Across America tour. And he came on out, and we had breakfast, and he read my one-sheet proposal, and he thought it was a great idea, and he said, yeah, he wanted to partner with me. So next thing you know, I was digitizing the footage, capturing the footage into the computer, and started cutting the documentary. That was 7 years ago. It took me nearly 7 years to cut the thing. And it's great. I think it's a great documentary. Anyway, that's the long and drawn-out story of how I got from there to here. Hopefully, Laughing All the Way is not going to be the end. That I can parlay that into another project after this, and hopefully I'll be shooting another documentary sometime in the near future, something I really want to do and will enjoy and can make some money at, and we'll see. I'm 62 years old now. What else am I going to do? I don't think Steven Spielberg's going to hire me for his next movie. Well, I wouldn't do it anyway, but if Quentin Tarantino called. Anyway, thank you for sitting through this long-winded story. I hope you got something out of it. Tried to make it somewhat entertaining. Anyway, hopefully I'll see you soon on the next one.